Hello, friends.
Welcome to episode 8 of our podcast, Kidsplorers. We're so excited that you're joining us on our journey to explore and discover new things. You might remember that in our last episode, we explored the history of Black people in North America. We learned about important Black people as well as events that shaped the history of Black communities in North America. We also discussed why it is important to learn about the history of Black people. At the end of last week's episode, Professor Smarty Pants suggested that we explore another interesting topic this week. Do you guys remember what this topic is?
Of course, Professor suggested that we should learn about the Titanic.
I have to tell you guys that I'm so excited about this topic. I have been really interested in learning about the Titanic for a long time now.
Me too. When I was younger, I watched the Titanic movie, and ever since, I became very interested in what happened with this ship. I'm excited to explore this topic with you guys and with Professor Smarty Pants. But wait a minute. Speaking of Professor, where is he?
Oh, that must be him.
I'll get the door. It's Professor Smarty Pants. Hi, Professor.
Hello, friends. I hope you didn't start exploring today's topic without me.
We have been waiting for you.
But please don't keep us waiting any longer. We have waited a whole week, and now we really want to learn about the Titanic.
I agree. Let's get started. Professor, come on in and get comfortable.
Okay, so where do we start?
At the beginning, I don't know so much about the Titanic.
Awesome. The beginning is always the best place to start. Isabella, since you said you don't know much about the Titanic, I wonder if you know what the Titanic was.
This I know. The Titanic was a giant ship.
It really was. The idea for the Titanic was born on April the 30th, 1907. You see, that evening, while having dinner together, two men named J. Bruce Ismay and Lord William James Peary came up with the idea of building the largest luxury liner ship in the world. This ship would later be named the Titanic. They agreed that they would build a total of 3 ships, 2 of which were considered sister ships to the Titanic. The sister ships would be called the Britannic and the Olympic.
I read that around this time, there was a lot of competition between different shipbuilding companies to produce the largest and best ship in the world.
That's right. The 2 men that Professor mentioned were businessmen who worked in the shipbuilding industry. They were very experienced in building big ships, but the Titanic, Britannic, and Olympic would be the biggest they have ever built.
There was a great competition in the world as to who would build the largest ship. Everyone wanted to be the first, and at the time there was quite a few shipbuilding companies working on similar projects. Once they came up with the idea for building the Titanic, they did not wait long to get started on the construction of the ship. On March 21st, 1909, a company named White Star Line began construction on the Titanic in Belfast, Ireland. The company was owned by J.P. Morgan, a very wealthy American businessman.
Wait a minute. So if the Titanic set sail in 1912, but they started building it in 1909, it must have taken them 3 years to finish building it. That's a long time.
It must have been so difficult if it took so long.
Absolutely. It took 3,000 people to complete the construction of the ship. There were people from many different professions involved in building the ship. Amongst them were designers, blacksmiths, molders, crane men, carpenters, electricians, painters, and many others.
Wow! I never thought of this, but other than building the metal exterior of the ship, the inside of the ship also needed a lot of work.
Absolutely. J. Bruce Ismay and Lord William James Peary wanted the RMS Titanic to be not only the biggest ships of the time, but also the most luxurious and modern ship to date, and they really succeeded.
Oh boy, did they! The Titanic was a beautiful ship, both inside and out. It was one of the very first ships to have a telephone system, and the first ship ever to have electric lights in every bedroom, 4 elevators, a heated swimming pool, a gym, 2 libraries, 2 barber shops, and 840 rooms.
Oh, it sounds beautiful, but I also think it's very expensive to build.
It sure was. I read that it cost the White Star Line Company $7.5 million to build the Titanic.
That's right. With inflation, this amount would be $200 million.
What does inflation mean?
Inflation is how much something increases in price over time. This means that in 1909, when the Titanic was being built, it cost less than today to pay the workers and buy the materials needed for the construction of the RMS Titanic. If it would have been built today, it would cost about $200 million as opposed to $7.5 million, which is the cost back then.
Wait a minute. You keep calling it the RMS Titanic, but isn't it just the Titanic?
Great question. I also didn't know what it meant, and I didn't even know that this was the actual name of the ship until I did some research this week. RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship. Can you guess why?
Did the Titanic carry mail?
It did. Back in 1912, mail took quite some time to be delivered. The best way to send it was with an official Royal Mail ship. Being one of the best modern ships, it was decided that the Titanic would be used not only to transport people, but also mail. In fact, on April 10th, 1912, when the RMS Titanic set sail, there were more than 6 million letters and packages headed to America.
That's a lot of mail.
It is, but of course, other than mail, the ship was prepared to transport all its guests and crew.
What is a crew?
The crew are the people who worked on the ship. It includes people like the captain of the ship, the chef, the server, and lots of other people who help passengers and to service the ship.
That's right. Aboard the Titanic, there were 1,317 passengers and 900 crew members. It is said that the ship could have accommodated twice as many guests as there were aboard the Titanic at the time that it set sail. The guests stayed in different types of accommodations depending on how much they were willing to pay per ticket. Tickets for first-class accommodations were the most expensive and cost $4,350. First-class passengers stayed in very luxurious rooms and enjoyed incredible meals and service. Second-class tickets cost $1,750 and offered wonderful accommodations. Third-class tickets cost $30 and offered a bit less comfortable accommodations. Of the total 840 cabins, 416 were first class, 162 were second class, and 262 were third class.
Wow, it sounds like the Titanic really was a really big ship.
It really was, just like J. Bruce Ismay and Lord William James Peary planned it. The Titanic became the largest ship in the world at that time. The Titanic measured 269 meters in length, which is the length of 19 school buses lined one after the other, and 53 meters in height, which is the height of an 18-story building. In 1920, the Titanic was the largest ship in the world. But of course, since then, bigger ships have been built.
This is very impressive, but Professor, more than 100 years passed since the Titanic was built. Why are people still curious about it today?
Well, let's take a deeper dive to figure out exactly what happened with the Titanic. Like Susanna said, the Titanic, led by Captain Edward Smith, embarked from Southampton, England, heading to New York, America on April the 10th, 1912. Aboard the ship were 2,435 people in total. The journey from England to America was meant to take a total of 137 hours, which is roughly 5.5 days. But at the night on April the 15th, everything changed.
What do you mean?
Well, that night the ocean was very quiet. There was no wind or storm. Now you would think that this is a good thing, and in many ways it was. But on this night, this weather made it difficult to spot any threats.
What type of threat was there?
Well, around the time of this accident, several icebergs were floating in the ocean along the route of the Titanic. The icebergs broke off from the country of Greenland, and the water slowly carried them away to other areas in the ocean. One of these giant icebergs eventually made it to the route that the Titanic was on. Since the weather was very calm, no one noticed the iceberg, and the Titanic eventually collided with it.
Oh no!
It's very sad, but Professor, is it true that the Titanic received 6 warnings from the other passing ships that icebergs were spotted in the area?
It is true. Unfortunately, those warnings were ignored by the ship crew.
That's a terrible mistake. Had they listened to these warnings, this accident could have been prevented. So what happened when the Titanic collided with the iceberg?
Unfortunately, by the time they noticed the iceberg, the damage to the ship was already too big. The collision caused a giant hole in the ship, which caused the ship to quickly fill up with ocean water and ultimately caused the ship to sink. It took the Titanic 2 hours and 40 minutes from the moment of collision to sink to the bottom of the ocean.
In addition to ignoring warnings of icebergs, the crew on the ship made a few other mistakes, which caused even more problems. Before the ship started their journey, it was decided that instead of having 64 lifeboats, which the ship could have fit, they would only install 20. This was done mainly because it was thought that too many lifeboats on the ship would make the beautiful Titanic look not as nice.
That's such a silly reason. So what happened next?
Well, because of how few lifeboats were available, not all the passengers could fit in them. There was also a huge panic when passengers realized that the ship was sinking, which caused people to board the lifeboats early, releasing them into the water before they were filled to capacity.
What do you mean?
The 20 lifeboats on board that night could have accommodated a total of 1,178 people. However, because people were panicked and rushing to safety, they did not wait for the boats to be full of passengers before they went into the water. Instead, there were only 705 people in the lifeboats, and these were the only people who survived this accident. If all 64 lifeboats were aboard the ship at the time of the accident, all passengers and crew would have survived this accident. And if the 20 available lifeboats were filled with as many passengers as possible, the number of people who survived this accident would have been much higher.
But what about life jackets?
That's another problem. There were enough life jackets on the boat for all passengers. There were actually 3,500 life jackets. The problem is that at the time of the accident, the ocean water was -2 degrees Celsius. This means that the water was so cold that people who stayed in it for more than 15 minutes could have died.
This is so sad. It sounds like a lot could have been done to prevent this accident, or at least to make sure that all the passengers and crew make it out safely.
You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, this accident was catastrophic. What I have learned though is that as difficult as it is to know that accident happens, accidents help scientists, engineers, captains, and everyone else learn from mistakes in order to prevent them. For example, because there was not enough lifeboats on the Titanic, which meant that not all passengers made it out safely, ships are now required to have enough lifeboats or life raft to accommodate all passengers aboard a ship.
It sounds like something good came from the accident after all.
That's true. But wait, we still don't know what happened to the people in the lifeboats after the Titanic sank.
Within a few hours of this accident, another ship, called the RMS Carpathia, was able to rescue all the survivors of the Titanic who were floating on lifeboats in the area of the collision. Now I have a question. I heard that for a long time, no one was able to find the exact place where the Titanic sank. Professor, Has the ship really never been found?
Great question. Many different people and teams worked very hard for many years to try find the site of the sunk ship. For 73 years, no one was able to locate it. However, in the year 1985, Dr. Robert Ballard and a team of researchers finally located the wreckage with the help of a robot submarine.
A robot submarine? It sounds like they had the best research tools.
For sure. When I learned that, I got a little jealous that I've never got to use this tool.
Hey guys, you know how much I love mysteries. I read a bit about the Titanic before we met today and learned something very spooky. In the year 1898, 14 years before the accident of Titanic, a man by the name of Morgan Robertson wrote a book named The Wreck of the Titan. This book described a ship called the Titan, which sank to the bottom of the ocean after colliding with a giant iceberg. It's too spooky to be a coincidence, no?
Wow, I never heard of this. I don't know. It sounds like Mr. Robertson had a great imagination, but I really don't think these two could be related.
I agree. This is an incredible coincidence, but I doubt that they are related.
Well, I don't know about all of you, but I learned so much today.
Me too. I can finally say that all my questions about the Titanic have been answered. Guys, I want to share with you a topic that I hope we can explore next week. About 2 years ago, our family started our own little backyard farm. During this time, Isabella and I have been enjoying looking at different pollinators who visited our garden. Of all pollinators, our favorite are the bees. I think it would be amazing to learn about bees and see what all the buzz is about. Get it? Because bees buzz?
Wait, that was actually funny, and I really love this idea.
Hey, me too. I can't wait to plant our garden again this year and see all our pollinator friends come back to visit us. I'd also love to surprise our listeners by exploring with them how important bees are to all of us. Professor Smarty Pants, thank you very much for helping us explore everything there is to know about the Titanic. We loved exploring this very interesting topic. Friends, join us again next Sunday as we explore another extremely important topic, bees. We really hope that you liked today's episode. We would be so excited if you would share our podcast with all your friends who you think would like to join us on our explorations. We always look forward to hearing from you about any feedback and suggestions for what you'd like us to explore in future episodes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching Kidsplorers Podcast. In the meantime, if you liked our episode today, we would be so excited if you could give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform that you listen to us on. It will mean so much to us. And this is it.